Premium SSDs. They give you pretty good performance and better SLAs than the standard SSDs, but you can't really accuse them of being flexible. Want to go from 1 or 2 terabytes to 5? Well, then you have to shut down and deallocate your VM before you change its disk size to 8 terabytes. Or do you want to just upgrade the performance? Nope, can't do it, unless you also want to pay for the additional disk size, that is. Version 2 of Premium SSDs set out to change all of this, and at the same time they will provide you with a lot more performance. So let's check it out. As always, please subscribe and hit that like button as well. The current state of Premium SSDs in Azure is that you have to select a specific tier of disk, and that tier dictates not only what amount of storage you get, but also the performance of the disk. And changing tiers on the disks requires you to stop and deallocate the VM, so you can't really do changes on the fly like you might be used to from VMware or Hyper-V or really any other virtualization platform. What you can do on the fly is to set the performance tier of a disk to something higher than the disk tier itself. That does give you the added performance and the cost, but it doesn't give you the added stored capacity. And since Premium SSDs only are available in specific tiers, chances are that whatever capacity you want is not one of the available ones. The tiers range from 4 GB up to 32 TB, but each additional step up in tier doubles the capacity. So if you need, say, 9 or 10 TB, then you have to select the 16 TB tier. And you just can't have a tiny disk with a lot of performance, which is a shame. Ultra disks are an alternative to Premium SSDs if you want the performance and flexibility though. They do provide the highest level of performance you can get on disks in Azure, and they are super flexible, at least compared to standard or Premium SSDs. There never really was a good middle ground between Ultra disks and Premium disks, so you would either end up with disks that are way better and more expensive than you need, or you would just accept the lower performance. Premium SSDs V2 is that middle ground. It has the flexibility of Ultra Disk and provide a lot more performance than Premium SSD V1. Keep in mind that Premium SSD V2 is in preview at the moment, so things can change when it becomes generally available, and there's also a ton of limitations on them currently, which I'll cover a bit later on. So unlike version 1 of Premium SSDs, version 2 does not have any specific tiers. Instead, you simply specify the disk size you want, the number of IOPS, and the disk throughput you want. And can you believe it? You can change it live. That being said, you can't really specify what you want. There are limits, and the performance you can have scales along with the size. So let's start by talking about the disk sizes available to you. V2 of Premium SSDs can be from 1 GB to 64 TB. Or to be precise, 1 GB to 64 TB, but let's stick to gigabytes and terabytes for simplicity's sake. And you can specify exactly the size you want within 1 GB increments. While in public preview, there is a soft limit of 32 TB per region per subscription by default, but you can request more capacity if you so want. Premium SSD V2 disks will all have a baseline performance of 3000 IOPS and 125 MB per second of throughput. These numbers can be increased to your liking up to a maximum of 80,000 IOPS and 1,200 MB per second of throughput. But the maximum you can specify is also linked to the capacity of the disk. Now, the math here can get tough, but bear with me. So the baseline performance is all you get up to a capacity of 6 GB, meaning a disk with 6 GB of capacity or lower will always have the 3000 IOPS and a 125 MB per second of throughput as their maximum. IOPS is limited by and tied to the capacity of the disk, and the throughput is limited by and tied to the IOPS of the disk. For capacities exceeding 6 GB, you will have the ability to increase the IOPS with 500 per gigabyte. So that 6 GB disk, which has a 3000 IOPS max, will have its maximum IOPS increased to 3500 if you increase the size to 7 GB. This goes on and on until you reach the maximum IOPS, which is 80,000. So say we increase the size of that 6 GB disk to 100 GB. That's an increase of 94 GB. And since each additional gigabyte increases the max IOPS by 500, that would give us 94 times 500 more max IOPS in addition to the baseline 3000, meaning that a 100 GB disk will have a maximum of 50,000 IOPS. The absolute maximum your Premium SSD V2 disks can have is 80,000, which requires you to have a disk size of at least 160 gigabytes. Now for the throughput. The math gets even tougher here. Like I said earlier, all V2 Premium SSD disks will have a baseline throughput of 125 megabytes per second. That's what you get regardless of capacity and IOPS. But like I also mentioned, the maximum throughput is 1200 megabytes per second. After the initial 6 gigabytes, your maximum throughput can be increased by 0.25 megabytes per second per set IOPS. You might be going, what? At this point, and that's fair, so let's do a couple of examples. Say you have a disk with 3000 IOPS, which is the baseline of IOPS. With that number of IOPS, the maximum throughput is 750 megabytes per second. If you're wondering about the math here, then let me do it for you. 3000 times 0.25 equals 750. Increasing the IOPS by 1000 to 4000, that would increase the maximum throughput with 1000 times 0.25, which would be an increase of 250, giving a total of 1000 megabytes per second as a maximum. Now, if we follow the math, that means then in order to achieve the maximum throughput, which again is 1200 megabytes per second, you would need at least 4800 IOPS, because 4800 times 0.25 is 1200. The documentation states that you need 5000 IOPS to achieve that 1200 megabytes per second throughput, but both the math and Portal disagrees here. Okay, so that's the performance and a bit of complicated math. Now let's move on to pricing of these disks, because with version 1 of Premium SSDs, it was quite easy. You select a tier and you pay for the cost of that tier. With V2 of Premium SSDs, the picture gets a bit more unclear. But with more flexibility comes more complexity with regards to cost, I guess. The foundation of the V2 Premium SSDs pricing is that they are built per hour based on capacity, IOPS, and throughput. And for capacity, that's really all there is. You pay per gigabyte. With regards to IOPS and throughput, it gets a bit more complicated, but it shouldn't be too hard. Like I mentioned in the performance section of the video, Premium SSDs V2 have a baseline IOPS and throughput. That baseline, that's included. You don't pay for it. That means that for IOPS, you get 3000 of them for free. If your disk is set up with, for example, 7000 IOPS, you will be billed for 4000 IOPS, because 7000 minus 3000 is 4000. And with throughputs, it's the same. That 125 megabyte per second baseline is free, and you're only billed for anything above that. So just to give you an example of this also, say you have a disk with 500 megabytes per second of throughput, you can subtract the baseline 125 from that, leaving 375 megabytes per second that you will be billed for. Lastly, like most Azure resources, the prices for all of this varies between regions. So over to the elephant in the room, limitations. Some of the limitations could be due to the fact that V2 Premium disks are in preview, but I do expect some of these to remain even after going GA. Premium SSDs V2 share a lot of similarities with Ultra disks, also the limitations. Like Ultra disks, Premium SSD V2 disks cannot be used as OS disks. They don't support snapshots. They can only be created as empty disks, meaning they can't be created from snapshots. Azure Disk Encryption is not supported, and availability sets is not supported. Additionally, Premium SSD V2 disks are only available in 2 regions, US East and West Europe. They can only be attached to zonal VMs, they can't be attached to VMs in a SCADA set, and they can't be attached to VMs with encryption at host enabled. And finally, VMs with Premium SSD V2 disks don't support Azure Backup or Azure Site Recovery. So you can't use Azure's native tools to back up VMs with these kinds of disks. Like I said, I expect some of these limitations is because the service is in preview, but as you can imagine, Premium SSD V2 disks is not something you will want to use for all of your production VMs. Ultra disks, for example, are in GA and still have some of the same limitations. If this topic is something that interests you, then you might also find this video on capacity reservations for VM interesting. So hit that like button below and then check out that video. Cheers!